Yeah,
Okay, so Pearl Handled Revolver will be playing, correct me if I'm wrong here, the Nene Valley, is it Rock Festival on Friday the
yep,
1st of September? If I'm not
yep.
mistaken, are you headlining one of the stages?
We are. Yep,
yeah.
we're headlining one of
Uh,
the stages. Yeah.
I'm definitely going to be there, and I'm hoping to be able to catch a bit of Corky Lang's Mountain and then get over and see your complete set. I don't know if they're going to clash or not, but I'm
No, we clash a little bit with 10 years after, but hey,
We won't say
we
anything
won't say anything
about
about
Well,
that.
I saw talking about 10 years after I saw Alvin Lee in concert many years ago, but I've never seen. I don't know who this incarnation of 10 years after is. Actually, I'll have to.
They've got a younger guy, but I'm not sure. Actually, I should know, but I don't know that his name. Do you know his
that.
name?
No, I'm not
But
sure.
he's good. But obviously, we're going to be better.
Okay, okay. So the first question is a fairly obvious one, really. It's more of a discussion which you can sort of share out between. The first one is uh, tell me about the band. How did you meet, and how did you come by this excellent name?
You want
Lee.
to take that one, Chris?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, so Simon and Lee really, you started it, didn't you? You started. It's your
Yeah.
fault.
Yeah, it's my fault and his fault.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a project, more of a studio project, and it slowly over time grew into this what it is now. Andy joined in 2008, I think, when you were looking for
Yeah,
guitarists,
yeah,
and Ollie, who's the bassist on the first CD of this compilation, and then I joined in 2009, I think. Yeah, and that was how we sort of, it just grew sort of exponentially, over the years, and and with that, and then Ollie left 2013, moved to Amsterdam, well, moved to Holland, sorry, and yeah, that's when you picked up the bass keys, isn't it? And
yeah.
that's kind of,
We didn't
so this,
replace him.
yeah, so this
So
album, like, it's kind of, the first CD is what we sort of call the Ollie years because we had a bassist. The second CD is when we moved down to a four-piece.
Right.
Obviously, like Simon was saying, I've got Lucas back in playing bass and guitar, so we were kind of in a third iteration now. So those, it's sort of, that was another thing with the compilation. It frames these different eras quite nicely. It feels like a good break point to do that compilation.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a long,
You said you had a. Did you
long.
say you had a bass keyboard
yeah,
initially? So like Raymond.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
We initially had a bassist, and as we said, he fell in love with a girl on tour
Mhm.
and and stayed.
Ah,
So we
Was that supporting the Black Crows, or
it
was
was
that
probably the Black Crows,
yeah?
yeah, and
And Paradiso.
Paradiso in Amsterdam. He met her, and we were just about to start a new album, which was if the devil
If
cast
the
it.
Devil
Yeah.
Cast Is Now, I think. Yeah, yeah.
So we
So
thought.
disastrous, wasn't it? Really?
So we thought, well, what are we going to do? I said, well, I'll play the bass for now as we learn the songs, and
yeah.
we'll see what happens. And the guys were more up for it than me. I can tell you. I'm an organist, and I'm used to playing bass, but not with a rock band.
Right.
And I had to kind of learn this new way of playing bass along with the organ and everything, and they liked it. So we stuck with it. We did the album like that, and then we tried a few people out. Nobody fit the bill, so we carried on as a four, and
Right.
it just became a part of our sound, I think, at the time, and we still play that way. As we said, Lucas has joined, and he's carrying some of the bass, but he also picks up the guitar. So I'm back on the bass again, and it's quite nice to have the choice.
I must admit, I love that heavy organ infused sound that you have. It really
Thanks.
is right up my street. Really. I mean, dare I say it? I mean, it just reminds me of a lot of those '60s bands like sort of I'm Butterfly and things like that. Are those sort of bands an influence on you? What are your influences?
Yeah, absolutely. We're all so diverse with our influences.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I suppose for me, a lot of it is that Deep Purple, Rolling Butterfly, and The Doors, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so many. But the organ thing, Santana, I suppose Greg Rowley's sound has always been a big thing for me. Um, but Lee's originally a blues man, sort of. So
Mhm.
there's
Yeah, I'm more into, I suppose, well, definitely more into the male vocal songwriters.
Oh, okay.
Essentially, ones that are a bit out there or have something unusual about their voice.
Right.
Tom Waits, Nick Cave, Beefheart.
Yeah.
What was that one? Who's the guy? I forget his name now. Wild.
Joe Cocker?
Hawkins.
Yeah.
Hawkins.
Hawkins and Betty Levette.
Betty Levette, huge. Yeah, she's one of the few female vocalists that sort of encroach. Her and Joe Mitchell for me.
Yeah, it's, I mean, listening to your music, it's a real smorgasbord of sort of influences and things, but it's absolutely fabulous. I've heard somebody use the term Americana to describe your music. I wonder if you would agree with that to some extent.
No, I don't really hear a country sort of rock influence at all, to be honest.
Not really.
No.
We were signed to an American label. That was our first, where we got signed, and we're not signed with them now. We're independent, but I think what they saw in us as a potential was because they were associated with the Allman Brothers, weren't they? And
the Allman Brothers,
Lynyrd Skynyrd, and that sort of thing. So they saw us as the next British incarnation of the Allman Brothers, maybe, or something like that. I don't know what they saw, but
I think they did, because they seemed to guide us. They seemed to try to sort of push us in a certain direction, which we could notice it straight away, and it quickly unravelled. But we ended amicably. But you do realise that some people have their own agenda rather than necessarily noticing what yours is.
An artistic one.
Right. Well, I mean, I've got to talk about this wonderful set, Psychedelic Attic. I mean, simply by virtue of it being called Psychedelic Attic, people should buy it. It's such a great title, I think. It's a wonderful set. It's first of all, can you tell me a little bit about this set, really, and how did you come to actually select the tunes for this? And by the way, there will be a purchasing link for this just beneath this video, so do check it out.
Yeah, well, I think it all started during the lockdown. Obviously it was difficult for us to get together, wasn't it, and rehearse and write and things. And I had the bright idea of remastering some of the back catalogue. I thought, some people just don't know this earlier stuff. Mm-hmm. We've sold out of most of the stuff. And we're not going to press a lot of the early stuff again. It's very costly, and we thought, well, we'd make a compilation. So I started remastering it because I sort of recorded it originally, I suppose, as we produced as a band. And I realised actually some of the early stuff really needs remixing, because we've come a long way. We've learned a lot about mixing and mastering and making that sound as we want it. And so I thought it was a good opportunity. And I did 3 or 4, and it took, I don't know, 8-10 hours per song, and I just didn't have the time. So obviously Lucas, my son, is involved heavily. He's a degree student in sound engineering and recording, music production, and he's a multi-instrumentalist. He's involved with the band, and now he's playing with us. So,
and you grew up with the
music.
He knows the inside and
he literally sat with me. He sat with me while I was mixing it first time. Let me get involved. So he's lived and breathed it, and he said, I'll do it, Dad. I need to learn more and get more experience. I'll do it. So he did it, and he did a really good job of it. I mean, cracking. And he was learning as he was going more, obviously. And I think some of these mixes are like 4th version. He's like, I've learned something else new. I'm going to do it again. So he's
okay.
And we're so happy with it. Because it's the songs in the best way they can be.
Sure.
And getting back to what Chris was saying earlier about the selection of it all and why we really sort of put it together, essentially, we started, we'd found the early recordings from way back in the day when none of these members are still around anymore. But and we really loved it still. And it was quite exciting to see that this little 4-5 track project had led to all of this work. We saw it all lined up. We just did it, and it was something that I hadn't sung for many years, so I really needed to do something. I had lots of songs I'd written. At the time, my stepson was going to university in Brighton, He needed a drum track recording, so I spoke to Si, and we played around with a few things. So we thought, well, we'll try putting them down. And before we knew it, we had an EP. We were talking about doing some little gigs, and then we got some feedback from the university for Luke at the time. I think it kind of spurred me on personally. I know it wasn't meant for me, but it did. And I spoke to the lecturer. He hadn't actually got a place at this stage. The lecturer rang me up after receiving the CD. And he said two things. He said, firstly, I'm just checking that Luke was actually party to, working on these tracks. And I said, yes. And he said, right, well, my second question is, of course, he said, he's got a place because he said he's fantastic. But he said, who wrote the songs and who's singing on it? And we had this little chat, and I'd gone from being, well, I'm not sure whether I can do this anymore, to, oh, somebody in Brighton tells me I've got something and maybe I should carry on. And so for me, that was like a psychological click. Okay, I need to do something with this. And it really changed from then on. And thankfully I knew Si from a previous incarnation. And he just sort of, it blends well, the voice and that crunchy kind of keyboard. I find it difficult, perhaps I probably would, to sing with anybody else now. Because it's become almost the one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got you've got about 3 studio albums out. Is that right? 3 studio albums?
Four studio.
4 studio albums.
We're working on another one now.
Yeah,
but you've got quite a few live albums out as well, haven't you?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's 2 live albums. There's an acoustic live album and a full electric live album. Yeah.
So bootleg is the full electric album, and that was literally done live at a show.
Yeah.
Well, they both were. And Downtime is the acoustic one, isn't it? Which was done in like a little jazz club.
Well, the question I was going to ask, and certainly about the live albums, is do you feel like your sound is better represented live than on your studio records?
I see them as they're different things, really.
Yeah.
Studio is a place to experiment and to sort of and I don't think it's a consideration how it's going to work live when you're doing this, because it shouldn't be, because I think the studio itself is an instrument, so you incorporate that into what you're doing when you're writing, and if you're doing overdubs. And so I don't have any kind of attachment to the idea that like a rock album certainly should be just a live document, because you're capturing a moment into it's a false process. Like live is a moment that you'll never repeat. When you're recording something, you're saying you're capturing a moment in time that you're going to have to relive over and over and over again. It doesn't mean to say it's got to be perfect, but I think you're selling yourself short if sonically you just sort of just say we've got to get this down live and then we play it live. To me, I'm quite heavily influenced by like jazz music as well, a lot of jazz as well, and to me, so that argument goes back all the way through jazz about whether or not people should, people were up in arms about Miles Davis using Tia Masira to on the silent way to remake. Like you get it now with modern jazz when people say they incorporate elements of grime into jazz. Oh, it's not jazz. It's not. It's to be honest, studios are whatever you want them to be. Studios is so for me, like a live album is a document of a moment in time. A studio album is an opportunity to do something which is more. You've got a much broader canvas, so I don't see why you wouldn't use it, and that's kind of what informs how we do things in the studio. It's if an overdub is necessary or add something, then you put it on. You don't worry about whether or not you can then capture the maracas live or whatever it is. You do it because it's it's there. It fleshes it out.
Although that said, we have pretty much spent our whole recording careers getting to this point. And this point being. The arrangement of a wonderful little studio,
which you see behind you,
behind us, the cumulative knowledge of what we've learned in all that time of how to actually use that studio, and the knowledge that there is a vitality when we play live that we find exciting in other people's recordings. If they're live, Santana and people like that, you can hear the energy and the excitement in that recording. So we're aware that we want to try and capture some of the magic as live performances, and we've tried to get as close as we can without saying you can't do anything else. So we know that if we can get the bare bones down, and it's live, single take, we might stand a chance of getting that magic between us all just in that moment. We may then have to broaden it and so on. The guitarist is here, as you can hear.
How you doing, mate? Right.
But yes, so we have, although what Chris says is absolutely true, and I think we all feel the same way about it, but we have strived to create that live sound as much as possible, in essence, you know.
I'm interested. You described Fantasy Reigns as a leap forward. How do you think your sound has developed over the years? You know, from that those first recordings to the actual album you're recording now.
I think we've more successfully incorporated all our disparate influences.
Yeah,
it started off as something that was about exactly what Simon and Nene described. It's a very bluesy and grungy, and there was that angle. And I think as soon as certainly the lineup that we've got now, or our full lineup from about 2009, we just started every time we sat down to write, and we've always, we've never really stopped writing. We'd be bringing other elements of our, various musical interests in, if that makes sense. So it'd be like, stuff from soundtracks or electronic music, or maybe bits of sort of stoner rock and more soul, soul elements and stuff. And it's just kind of grown over. So there's always a core to our sound, I think, which will always be like a rawness. We've just got, and I think even things like the setbacks, like sort of our original bassist leaving, when Simon sat down with the key bass, and all of a sudden you find out he's got another octave on the bottom, like from a string bass, you get a much deeper, more resonant sound that feeds into the way we were playing, because the sound became sort of heavier and darker, and then you were doing a lot more sort of washy stuff over the top, because you were focusing a lot on bass, so that
probably calmed me down a little bit.
There's like I suppose, going back to what you said about the Americana thing, like there's a band War on Drugs who are kind of like, they're probably not strictly Americana, but they do have like an ambient American kind of, they've got a lot of synthy washes and sort of and that kind of feel to it. So I could see it if we're going in that direction. So those kind of things come in as well over time. And it's just been a slow process of just incorporating different influences. It's not even conscious sometimes. I think each album we've set out and done, we've either been doing it because we've lost a member, or we've decided we need to do so. And Fantasy Reigns, I suppose, was the second album without a bassist, wasn't it? And we were kind of we were sort of maybe more confident about that. So that
the whole psychedelic
it was much
sound had evolved as well. So we really immersed ourselves in those ethereal sounds, especially on Belly of the Whale. I think is a key track for us, and that was a turning point for us. We'd actually recorded some, when I'm listening back to our early back catalogue, there was tracks that led to things like Belly of the Whale. So we were thinking about it back in 2010 or 12.
We either didn't have the equipment to quite pull it off, or we didn't quite know
maybe
how to do it yet, and
maybe it just needed to evolve a little bit more before we actually did it.
I think that kind of fed into the selection for Psychedelic Attic in terms of, because because you said about how do we choose tracks, and part of that was where it was picking out the ones where we successfully sort of it was really nice going back and listening to some of that older stuff, because I mean I hadn't listened to it for a long time, and hearing some of the ideas which have come to fruition later where we did them successfully early on. So there's stuff from the early EPs. Robin's Garden is one that stands out, which was one of the first things we did, which was much more sort of low key and psychedelic and a bit more driving. And then there was heavier stuff from the second album, and you sort of, and it was nice going back, re-listening to that stuff and hearing where we were going, even if at the time we weren't sure about it. And the track listing on Psychedelic Attic was designed to reflect that idea of, not necessarily doing it chronologically, but the way all these different things have crept in and sort of rushing through time, as it were.
It's funny that you say that, even though we didn't know it was happening, because I don't think we necessarily needed to.
No, we didn't. No, we didn't. No,
I
it was
think
just
it
we
was,
would.
you know, if we stayed together long enough, it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing. So that's like a history of
Yeah.
what will happen if you stick together long enough.
Yeah.
Okay. When I listen to it, I'll bear that in mind. I'll listen to it.
We never sat down and gone like, I think we should write a song like this. You know, it's always like, we talk. We have like, once we're writing, we talk about where things are going, and maybe we should try something like this or like that. But we've never sat down and gone, do you know what I think we need to do now is like a really psychedelic record. It's just like we start writing, and the ones that that we all get excited by, then we'll have, like, so like the first few tracks on an album will kind of inform the progression, but it's never like right, we did that and now it's time to do that. You know, I think we're just kind of happy to sort of go with what excites us collectively when we're writing.
I've got to ask you, there's a track on there called Help Me Down the Trees. I love that track. I'm just wondering, I was listening to that, I was just wondering, are you guys big fans of the Electric Prunes and the Velvet Underground and stuff like that?
Yeah.
And where we perform that at the moment, we're playing Belly of the Whale into that, and that seems to quite often that's closing our set. We merge the two, so I mean,
come out of this male,
so 12 minutes of Belly of the Whale into 7 minutes of Helping Down for the Trees.
It's interesting you put that one out, because that was the first one we wrote for Devil as well. Actually, that was because it was when Simon. It was like one of the first. You know, we would one night when you would you feeling your way through the bass and stuff.
Yeah,
and that bass line came out, and that actually, as I remember it, that song as it is pretty much the arrangement of the very first time we jammed it. We just kind of went through it. We had those couple of parts, and we were just alternating between them and moving, you know, in it and trying to shift things within that sort of structure. And it just took off straight away. And that kind of fed, and that's why one of the reasons why it opens the album. But it did. That was the thing that signposted where we were going for If the Devil Casts His Net. It was very much that song, because it was a bit more driving, and it kind of it just really flowed, and it was
2013 Best New UK Band by Classic Rock Magazine. That must have been a bit of a buzz for you.
It was.
I think they quite liked us. They've always been good to us, actually. And they've always reviewed and
even though we never spend any money with them.
No, well, that
might be.
We had a lot of good reviews for all the albums. I don't think we've ever had a bad review. I've never seen it anyway. They've always been positive. We know that not everybody's going to love our sound, but
I think a lot of my subscribers, a lot of my audience are heavily into progressive rock, really. But there's quite a nice heavy, I would almost say proggy sound to some of the things you do, really. And you've been endorsed by Wilco Johnson and Jon Lord, is that right?
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
Well, sort of, funny enough, the first Pearl Handled Revolver gig that we did
ever
proper gig, that was quite a bizarre experience. It was for I don't know quite an hour.
It was Lord McAlpine's private residence, which is huge. And we weren't told this. We drove down in a clapped out old car.
Exhaust fell off.
One of the exhaust pipes fell off before we made it to the main gates.
Parked next to a Bentley.
And then walked down the hill into what became the Vista was basically old Morgan's, very old vintage cars, all lined up, Rolls Royces,
railway museum,
a whole railway line.
It was fantastic.
And they said, right, go and set your stuff up. And we were like, what's going on here? So we set up. We were actually in the old station on the back, and we set up and we played about 8 songs. I think that's all we had.
Don't remember, but
it was something like that. And before we started, Simon leant over and said, "You do know that is sitting down there, don't you?" And there was a whole selection, tables, people all sat there, they're having, sandwiches and things. It's all very lovely. And there was Ian Pace and Jon Lord.
Oh, wow.
Respective partners.
Jon Lord's next door neighbour. But he said somewhere over there, a long way over there. It did make us laugh because he said, there's real money here. Okay. But we had a lovely chat. And
he really enjoyed it.
He loved it,
He seemed
and
genuine about
yeah, and obviously he and I got on because we're Hammond enthusiasts.
Yeah.
We talked about Hammonds for a long time. We had an ice cream together.
Yeah,
didn't
I
we?
got an ice cream. I had an ice cream with Melvin Bragg as well, which
Oh, okay.
not musical at all.
No. It was an interesting day, but yeah, he was there at the first gig. We've played with Wilco many times. We've played with the Blockheads many times, and there's.
I think the Mark II of Deep Purple, that classic Mark II line, it was one of the first gigs I ever attended many years ago. Can't be beaten. I think absolutely fantastic.
Well, funny enough, Don Airy is a neighbour-ish. He's one of the villages near here. And we met him as well, and he signed my Hammond B3. He said, "Can I have a look at it?" So he was eyeing up my B3, and if you sign it, so he signed it. I've got 3 signatures inside it: Steve Winwood and from the Blockheads.
Oh God, yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, so yeah, he signed it anyway, and really nice guy. But so we've met him as well. But,
Excellent. In My Blood, based on Ted Hughes, The Thought Fox. I mean, would you describe yourself as a theme-based band at all? Generally,
I just read a lot of poetry and
good man.
I think it's fair to say the lads kind of just leave that side of it up to me. We sort of worked. I do explain to them what it all means. If they're asked,
we still don't know.
No, but some of them are a complete mystery to them, even years later. But I quite like the ambiguity of Ted Hughes. I like the earthy tones.
Yeah,
that seems to go well.
Your music
with the music.
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating track. I mean, I've only got one more question for you before I plug this compilation again, and it's a general question, really, and that is, do you think it's really tough these days for bands to make it, given that streaming now seems to be replacing album sales?
I think it depends how you define making it, doesn't it?
Well, at least making a living, shall we say?
Make a living, definitely. I mean, but I think that's that must be tough. But I suppose there is an element of, like, even if you go back in time, the number of people who were making livings out of music proportionate to the number of people who are playing music is probably low anyway. I mean, certainly there's not the advances and the physical sales aren't there, but I think, and that is difficult. And the live circuit is a little bit difficult at the moment because cost of living, coming out of COVID, a lot of people in the industry had just left and had to because they had no alternative. So there is that. But I think that as a musician, if you want to just be able to sort of put your art and music out there, the internet is an amazing opportunity. And as like a music fan, I really like a world of Bandcamp where I can go on there and find out that some bloke has made a concept album about New Atlantis by Francis Bacon using a drum machine, hurdy-gurdy. Do you know what I mean? I would sooner. That does exist, by the way. It's a guy called F. Deming. Anyway,
plug for F. Deming.
But I would sooner have that as I like, because I mean, record companies, for all the good that they would have done to support bands, they also were very good at sort of funneling down and being sort of the arbiters and sort of the gatekeepers of what got through. And whereas now, because it is a free-for-all, you might have to wade through a lot of stuff which isn't so great. But when you get those gems, it is a leveler in terms of people, musicians or artists' ability to put their stuff out there. So it's not a perfect world.
And it has actually put the power back into the punter.
Into
the punter's hands. It's up to them, really. I mean, the trouble is they've got out of the principle of buying anything. And once the audience takes notice that everything's diminishing a little bit, they've not got so many gigs to go to, there's not so many venues, there may hopefully be a shift where they say, okay, yes, I've seen it happening a little bit already, where we've had an increase in sales online of our hard copies. People are actively sharing those purchases online themselves and saying, if you want to support good music, you need to buy direct. I think that won't ever change. There's always going to be that option. So if you really truly love something, it's given us a smorgasbord that the difference is now, we thought that would make us lazy. It's actually given us more to do.
Okay.
If anything, you've got to be more vigilant.
Yeah,
The record shop is now huge.
yeah.
And if we want these good things to prevail, then we ought to find them and pay them.
Yeah.
You know, we don't need record labels for that. We really don't. We never did.
No.
And that.
Well, I mean, you know, I'm actually hoping that from this interview, a few people might actually go out and buy this Psychedelic Attic, this wonderful collection or compilation of all your stuff. Really, it's absolutely fabulous. I will put a purchasing link just below the video. I presume you want me to put the purchasing link from your website.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Not from the dreaded Amazon.
No. And you can buy vinyl. We've got some of that isn't available on vinyl at the moment because it would be a quadruple, if not more, album. But we've got some of our other albums are vinyl.
I'll put a link to your store, then people can go there and sort out what it is they want. But anyway, I will be watching your set on the Friday at the Nene Valley Rock Festival. I might get to say hello. You can buy me an ice cream, perhaps.
Absolutely.
And you know, so until then, look forward to seeing you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. It's been great. Cheers.
Okay. Cheers. All the best. Bye-bye.
See you at the gig.
You will do.